Hello, everybody, and welcome to our recorded class today. We're going to be talking about the theory of information architecture today. We'll be touching on a lot of foundational concepts in IA, and we will have a discussion later that is designed to focus on the application of IA in a real world physical environment, so that makes it more practical. So as you can see, the slides I'm going to go through for the lecture today are going to be very theoretical, but the application of those theories are very, very important, are very significant, and we'll explore them in the discussion that you're going to do. So I would like you to watch this lecture on Monday, and I am expecting you to complete your discussions on the same day. So you have until the end of Monday, 10 p.m. to complete your discussions and relate the concepts that we discussed to a practical application. I will talk a little bit more after this lecture about your assignments and your discussion, but let's go ahead and delve into our lecture. I'm going to pull up my slides and share my screen. All right. Organization systems, labeling, navigation, search. Information architecture is consisted of four main elements. The organization systems that describes how we organize and group information, labeling system, which focuses on how we label things and present it on the interface, navigation system that describes how users would browse or move through our interface and the information that's presented there, and searching systems, how we search and find information. These four components are completely related. Like, in order to have an organization system, you need to have a labeling. Like, labeling is in your organization system. Navigation uses labeling to organize things. So they're not four separate things. We are separating them so that we can talk about each one of them in depth. But as you can see, they are really related. They're all part of one thing, which is information architecture. So organization systems. First of all, an organization system is challenging to design. Some of those challenges are, first, ambiguity, meaning that we use language to describe and organize information, and language is ambiguous. It can mean different things. Like a word like tomato, it could be categorized, grouped as a fruit, it could be a vegetable or a berry. So when you're designing, let's say, a website for a grocery store, online store, you need to group it and organize it in a way, and it may be not very clear how you would want to organize it. Or let's say if there is a book with the subject of alternative healing, is it the philosophy, is it the religion, is it health and medicine, or all of the above? So when we use language, a word can have different meanings and people can understand it differently. So that's one of the challenges that we face when we are organizing information. Heterogeneity refers to your items being composed of unrelated, unlike parts. When you catalog books, for instance, it's pretty simple because they're all books. But imagine if you were going to catalog books and CDs and some documents and throw in the mix, let's say, directions to a location, because these have like there are different types of information. Organizing them it's going to be difficult. If you have a website that is heterogeneous, meaning it has all these different parts, structuring and organizing a single structured classified system can be challenging. Differences in perspectives. The person or people who organize information, the way they think about things, is going to dictate a lot of times how they're organized, and they may not make a lot of sense to the users who are using it. So a lot of departments organize the information based on their organization chart, and users may not really know this specific type of information. Let's say, you know, on a university website, I'm making this example of information about retirement. That's a benefit, and the benefit department manages that. So they need to know it's a HR benefits information in order to go find it. When you design a structure, it's important to organize it based on how users think instead of how the internal divisions and org charts are. And obviously, one classification system does not fit all. Sometimes you may need to have multiple paths for people to find information. And in order to find out what organization structure makes sense to users, you need to do user research and analyze. You need to hear from people, observe people to find out what would make sense for that specific audience group. And lastly, internal politics. A lot of times the stakeholders, people who are in charge of a project, would have a specific opinions about how things should be organized, because organization and labeling systems usually have a big impact how users perceive a company or a product. So they care about how the message is sent. And there needs to always be a balance between the political environment and the user needs. And politics raise the complexity of this. You need to think about and be careful about something that should be designed with users in mind, be user-centered, but also satisfy the goal of your stakeholders or an organization or a business if you're working for one. Or you may have your own perspective in terms of like, what is the message that you want to communicate as a developer or designer of a product. And then through user research, you realize users actually see things in a different way. So you want to balance those two together. So there are two different aspects of an information environment when you're organizing it. It's the schemes and structures. Schemes are the ways how you group things based on characteristics of the content items. For instance, like all fruits being grouped together and baked goods grouped together. And, you know, you go to an example of a supermarket, you go to a section that has meat and poultry, like all of that is organized together. There's in a specific section, and then there's another section where you can find, you know, different things. So schemes are how we group things based on their characteristics. Structures is that how those groupings are done. Is it like in a hierarchy? Like there's a parent, then there's a child, or what are other ways that we're going to review here? So first, schemes. There are a few different models of schemes. One is exact schemes. Those are schemes that are well-defined, mutually exclusive sections. There's no ambiguity, and it works when people know what they're looking for. Examples are, for instance, alphabetical. If you have a phone book or a directory of people in an organization, like Micah's list of faculty, for instance, if you know the name of a person, That's known item searching. You know it, and it's organized. The scheme is exact. It's alphabetical. It could be like on a page. And when you look at the section that has the list of all the faculty within, like the graphic design department, it could be probably alphabetical. Or a phone book is usually alphabetical. Chronological means by time. News items or feeds a lot of times are chronological. So it's exact, it's specific. You want to find articles for yesterday, they're all grouped together. Geographical is based on a map. So let's say an app that shows items on a specific location. You go to that location, you see all those items. These are exact schemes. Ambiguous schemes are subjective. They apply when we don't always know what we are looking for, and typically they're more valuable. However, they have an ongoing need for maintenance. What are some examples and types of ambiguous schemes? One is topical. Then information is organized by topics, such as newspapers, consumer reports website, like Yahoo used to be very much that way, by topics, like Craigslist topics, like websites that organize, or it could be newspapers, physical, that organize things by topics. Task oriented, when you organize things by the task that the person needs to do. For instance, like university websites, a lot of times they have an explore, visit, apply, like that's task based. Login is a task-based. Contact is a task-based. You go to do a task. You organize it based on the task that the user needs to do. Audience is specific. When you break information and group them based on your audience, for instance, admissions could be broken down to freshman, transfer, and graduate. And then we have metaphor-driven. When you use metaphors to organize things like folders, files, recycle bin, these are metaphors from a familiar physical space that have been used in a digital space. So if you take a concept from a physical space and use it in a digital space and organize things according to those concepts. And hybrids are when you have multiple schemes at the same level of navigation. Now, obviously, these topical task-oriented audience space, they can be provided simultaneously, meaning that on a page, on a screen, you can have a section that is topical, a section that is task-oriented links, a section that has audience-specific links. Hybrid thinks about putting a few different types in the same list. So you may have like 10 links. Some of them are task-based. So you have explore, visit, apply, and then you have like a link for freshman students and transfer students, and then you have a link. So you have like 5, 6, 7, 10 different links that are a mix of these different things. It's very important that they cannot be deep. Deep meaning like having a lot of items. That's going to be very confusing if they are different types. So one of the things you want to really pay attention to in your project is that if you do a hybrid, it needs to be shallow. Otherwise, present it separately on the page. So you have a section for this type of ambiguous links or schemes, groupings of information, another location for these other types of links. Now, structures. So all that we're talking about is schemes. Now, structures. Structures are the ways we group them. It could be hierarchical, that is top down. And with the hierarchy, imagine like a website that has a home and then first level, and each one of those items, they have a few things under them. You need to balance between exclusivity and inclusivity, meaning that how many items you want to include in your navigation and whether you want to include everything. And imagine, for instance, if you have a form, and I'm giving an example of a website, let's say, or it could be an app. It says, let's say you have a section for your benefits and you have a section for your forms and you have a benefit form. So do you put that under both sections, under form sections and benefit section? Or do you put it under one of those sections? Or my suggestion, my recommendation usually is, instead of just putting it under one and for the user not being able to access from the other location, or putting it under both locations and making it a little confusing as to, like, okay, this item, does it belong here or there? And for the user to find the same information in two different places, they may think it's just two different things, not the same thing, because they're in two different, locations. Instead, you want to have it in one place and cross-link from the other locations. So put it, for instance, under forms, and also have a link from benefits to the benefit form under forms, but not house it in both locations. So that's the tension between exclusivity and inclusivity, making sure like how many items to put in the navigation and how exclusive or inclusive you want to be. Balance between breadth and depth, like how many items would be in the navigation and how deep the navigation is going to be. You don't want to have too many items in one list, but you don't want to have it to be very deep, meaning that you have to click too many levels to find it. So you want to have a balance there. So that's hierarchical. Another way of finding information is database oriented, and that works for homogeneous content. And that is like, let's say you want to have a list of articles, for instance, a list of pages, a list of, let's say you're designing a game, a list of like the weapons that a user can use. Database oriented, they don't have to go through a hierarchy to find it. They can just type it in because it's in the database. They can find it directly. They can directly go to the item. And you need metadata information, like information that you attach to those different pieces so that you can identify what they are. Hypertext is nonlinear, so if you have links, you can link them to different areas. It's not hierarchical, it's not database oriented. It's a link that goes specifically directly to another place. Or social classifications, those are when you use hashtags to organize information and structure. So when you're creating an organization scheme, in order for it to work, the first step is to understand the organization, the relationship between all these different pieces of information. And think about how these structures affect how users navigate your system. And when you have search and information retrieval, it works best if you apply it to a narrow domain of homogeneous content that is similar, not too very different, so that you can't really present it well. Exact schemes that we discussed are best for known item searching. If you know what you're looking for the name of something and you just directly go to it. Ambiguous schemes are best for browsing. Associative learning, when you navigate, browse, and you learn things and find things. And whenever possible, you want to use both. And obviously, a good organization, the recipe depends on the website and your goals. So it's going to be different site to site. All right, we're going to move on to our labeling systems. So that's the third aspect of information architecture. We use labels to represent large chunks of information. For instance, if you have a contact us information and you want to present that information, you don't want to put all of it on a home page. You want to put it on a separate page and have a link use a label for that link and link to it. So instead of presenting a lot of information, you chunk them, put a label on that chunk, and you link to it, right? And these labels can be textual or iconic. You can have like a text, such as contact us, or you can create an icon. And icons can be tricky, as we'll discuss. You need to be really careful as to make sure icons are understandable. How do you come up with different labels? The first source is your site or product. If you already have a site, you can look at what is there and come up with some labels. You can look at comparable and competitive sites, other products who do a similar thing and see what they use. And then control vocabularies and thesauri, which is basically dictionaries. Like when you look into synonyms for a word, you can pick up synonyms. So you can compose like a list of different options for labeling. And deciding like how these labels, how they would apply and what is best, you can either do a content analysis, again, your site, those domains, other places, to come up with a list. You can ask content authors if there are people who are writing or creating content, you can ask them. There might be subject matter experts, like there might be experts in area, like if it's like an application for law, there could be lawyers who know the subject matter and they may know specific labels. You can ask them directly from users, such as in card sorting or free listing. Card sorting, we're gonna explore a little bit in this class, in this course later on. Free listing is when you ask your users to brainstorm, like how would you label this thing? And you can ask them and they brainstorm and you will have a list. Or it could be indirectly from users. You can get that from search like analysis. If you use search, you can look into search and see what words people use, or you can do tag analysis. All right, we're going to be talking about the third aspect of information architecture now, which is navigation systems. We use navigation systems to find our course, know where we are, and find our way back. So those are a few different ways we use a navigation system. Navigation systems provide a sense of context and comfort as we explore new places. When people arrive on a new website, a new product, they use the navigation system to understand where they are, find their way around, and look for what they're searching. Some common types of navigation systems are embedded navigation systems, and this specifically applies to this whole navigation section talks about websites mostly. So websites have global, local, and contextual navigation. Global navigation is the shared navigation. It's usually at the top, it's usually horizontal. It applies to the entire site. Local navigation, typically it's in the left, it's vertical traditionally. And as you navigate through different sections, the local navigation can change. And contextual navigation are the links that are in the content section. You find where you are, where you can go, what is nearby, and what's related to what's here from those navigational elements. Supplemental navigation systems are sitemaps. A lot of websites have a sitemap that have a list. A sitemap is a list of all pages on a website, presented in a hierarchy. And you look at a sitemap, you can see every link on the website. Some sites have sitemaps. Sitemaps are also used for search engine optimization, and they're submitted to search engine. Indexes are usually alphabetical. Again, it's a list of everything on a section. on a site. They're alphabetical. You look at it, and under those, alphabetical structures, you can see what you're looking for. Guides are such as tutorials, wizards, where they take you through a process and show you different things, how to do things. They're step by step. And search. Search is a way of navigating a system. And then advanced navigation, personalization is when a user logs into a system, you know who they are, and present information based on who they are. So we, structure, organize, present information that is personalized to the person. Customization is when a user can decide what information they want to see, such as, like, I think Micah has both of those. When you log in to the portal, you can say what are your favorites. So, it knows these are the type of favorite topics you're interested in, but also personalization when the organization decides what information to show to faculty, for instance, or faculty of this specific department. And then visualization is when a user navigates elements based on their looks. So there are images, pictures, and you use those images and visual elements to navigate. And social navigations are dynamically generated based on users' network. So you have friends, you have a community, and the information that is presented to you and how you navigate it is very much dynamic. It's based on who else you're connected with and what they're doing. So those are some common types of navigation systems. And lastly, the fourth aspect of a information architecture is search. And a search system is composed of 5 elements. 1, users, like what are those users trying to do? What are their goals? How do they think? Their psychology, their behavior, how do they act? Then you have the interface, like the interaction design, the language affordances, like different items on the interface that they suggest. You can click here to do this. We can drag this to do that. There is a query when the person enters it, and then results and how they are displayed. Then there's the search engine. It has different features. There's an algorithm. There's a technology behind it. And then content. What content is being indexed, structured? What is the metadata that goes with that content? And then the creators, people who create these contents, what are the tools, processes, and incentives for them to create that content and add the metadata so that it goes into the search engine with the algorithm, displayed through the interface to the users who think in a specific way and act for a specific way. So those are 5 different aspects of search that we need to keep in mind when we're designing a search system. Not all websites, not all applications, not all products need search. You want to look into, first of all, how much content, what is the amount of content? Does it justify search? Is there really a need for a search? Sometimes it's better to focus on a better navigation system than search. Do you actually have researchers to configure and maintain search? Search is pretty complicated. You need to really be able to build a good search and return good results. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense to have a search. You want to see if there's any better alternative instead of, search having like an index for people to see everything that's there and select. And then finally, what are your user preferences? You want to really find out from users what works best for them and if search is needed. So you first of all want to identify whether you want to search or not. But then if you do, there are a few different things to keep in mind. Search zones are subsets of the website product or information that you have. Let's say if you have a search that searches only a specific type of products. If you have a search that looks into only a specific section of the website. Like for the university website, for instance, we have a search which only looks into policies and procedures. So a person types in, it doesn't bring all the information from different sections of the website, it's just policies and procedures. Policies and procedures in this case would be a search zone. You're searching within a very specific zone. Federated search is different. Federated search is kind of the opposite. You search different databases. You search, blogs and news feeds, and like you pull in a few different types of information into one search engine. That's called federated search. So search zones, federated search, those are two ways of limiting search to make it more specific, or pulling from bigger search databases and types of engines. A very important concept is precision versus recall. Recall refers to how many of the possible results were included in your search results. Precision is how relevant those results that were found were. To give you an example, like for the University of Maryland, Baltimore, where I work, a long time ago, our search, we designed it to have a very high recall, meaning that we wanted it to return, like when a person searches for a keyword, bring everything with that keyword so that it's very inclusive. It's like it has everything they may look for. The experience wasn't really good because we'll see PDFs, like presentations, they would see information from different schools. It was so many different types of things that it would make it very difficult to find what they exactly needed. It had a high recall, but low precision. A high precision means that you would limit it to more specific things. That means a high precision means a lower recall. So you really need to balance them. And it depends on your application. It depends on your product, where the balance is, and you want to do testing to see what really makes sense. But those are two aspects that you want to think about. Metadata is pieces of information that goes with the information. It describes who made it, what kind of info it is, when it was made, expiration date, keywords. Like photos have metadata. Like when you take a picture with your phone, it has a geolocation, that's the metadata. It has like information about the camera that it was taken on the phone. Like those little pieces of information that is attached to the file are called metadata. Like web pages have metadata. They describe like a lot of different things about the page. And metadata is very important for information finding. Search engines use metadata to index pages and information. Control vocabulary. When you design a search, you want to have different versions of a word, and I'm not going to go very much in detail when it's possible. It's very obvious. If a person searches for cat or kitty or kitten, you want to present the same information. So when you are looking into a search, you want to use controlled vocabularies, like different versions of a word, so that a person who enters something, all other versions of that word in the document or page or piece of information are retrieved. Stemming and spelling. Stemming is like cats swim versus swimming. Really wouldn't make it different. So you want to include, like if a person looks for a cat, also include results for cats. A lot of times people may not think about, but search engines are so complicated in terms of doing stemming, like finding different versions of something, and then the spelling. 10 to 15% of queries always contain misspelling. So you want to account, like Google is so great in misspelling. Like if you don't spell things correctly, you have to really, really misspell it for it not to find it. They have very sophisticated spelling algorithms in place that would know what you meant if you didn't spell something right. So that's another aspect. Like if you're designing search, you want to keep in mind considering stemming and spelling. Faucets are ways to gradually filter things and find them. For instance, a shirt can have faucets for if the color, like the gender that wears the shirt, the material, the type of buttons, how it's made, where it's important, or these are different faucets. And a search engine would allow users, usually like Amazon is great in that you can really go granular and find very specific pieces of information based on different characteristics which are called faucets. So you want to consider faucet. If you have a piece of information, you want to consider what are some different aspects of that and allow people to find that information based on their different aspects. And then query suggesters, when you start typing something, it fills finds the rest of it and autocomplete. When you have a form, it completes all the fields. Like these are another ways of, it either you have done that search in the past, it autocompletes it, or you start typing it and it suggests that it really helps people to find information. And another concept in search is best bets. Then you identified top searches and a person, a human, goes in and tags them. For instance, if you go to a news website, it might be like editor's choice, like they have tagged items as editor's choice, like things that are important, like promotions, recommended results. These are called best bets, meaning that a person goes in, like if you design a product, you may want to go in and tag things so that you can identify the important things and represent them to people in a different way. These are called best bets. An important aspect of best bets is that you can't just come up with them once and then forget about it. They really need maintenance. They need to be refreshed regularly. So these were some of the concepts about search. I'm gonna stop here and recap. We went over some different aspects of information architecture, the theory and foundation of it, how you organize information, how you group it, how you label it, how you create a navigation system, and how you design a search. These are different aspects of information systems. Now I'm gonna stop share and talk about a few things. Everything that we talked about mostly was focused on digital interfaces and specifically websites, but information architecture is really embedded in the real world. You can see it in so many places as you interact with items that need to be organized and categorized. A great example of information architecture is a supermarket, where you go in information, in this case, not information, but products that are sold at in a supermarket are organized based on concepts of information architecture. You have all these different aisles and sections. They use a specific labeling. There's a navigation into how you go and arrive in different sections, and there's search, which is asking. If you can't really find something, you ask for it, and that's the searching that happens. What I would like you to do, everything that we discussed today was very theoretical. I want you to go ahead and post in the discussion forum. We have an item, and I have written very descriptive information about what you need to do. I want you to go ahead and find an example of a good information architecture in a physical world and apply some of the concepts that we talked about today to that. For instance, supermarket. And I have an article, I linked to an article, online article. I want you to go ahead and read that. It's very interesting, it's enlightening, and it's very practical. You can see how these concepts that we talked about apply in real life. And I want you to come up with another example and describe it. Describe some of the concepts that we talked about, so that like schemes, structures, what is like navigation here, what are some of the labels that they have used. And you can include, I would like you to include either pictures or draw something quick and include annotations, describe the concept that you're trying to explain in this physical environment. And I'm just going to give a few other examples, like supermarket is an example. If you go to airports, the signs that describe like flights and flight information, that is a very good example of information architecture, like the way it's organized, the labels that they use. Like a library is a good example of information architecture. A bookstore is a good example of information architecture. So don't use these examples, come up with, there's so many different examples of good information architecture. I want you to pick an example and describe it and post it in discussion forum by the end of today, by 10 o'clock today. And another thing that I want you to do is to submit your project ideas. I've created an assignment for that. I want you to submit one idea or two if you're not sure, and I can help you pick one of those. And your group ideas are going to be submitted as groups. Discussions are individual, so each person submits their individual discussion, but each group submits one or two ideas for their group. And we discussed in last class, it could be anything that you want to develop. Make sure it's solving a problem, it's useful. And it has a few different screens. It's complex enough having a few different screens so that you can you can experiment and exercise some of the concepts that we're going to do. We're going to do card sorting, which you will have, different screens written in cards and sort them. And you want to have enough different pieces of information on pages, different pieces of information on each page and different pages so that you can do all these different exercises and learn from. So submit those by next class. Your assignment ideas, I want them by next Monday. I want your discussions by the end of today. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message in Canvas or email me. If I can answer you via email, I'll answer you. If not, I can schedule a Zoom meeting so that we can talk one-on-one and answer any questions that you may have. So that's it for today. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.